Hey everyone. So, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone. I hope this year brings you much happiness, peace, and lots of progress. I thought I'd start this year off by sharing the first of a four-part series of videos I did with Strathmore on some of the essentials of urban sketching. I'm really thankful to Strathmore for allowing me to share this with you. They're relatively short videos, but they cover a wide range of urban sketching fundamentals, including materials, framing, some composition, simplifying, creating emphasis, thumbnail sketching, and even some watercolor tips. So I will be releasing the other videos over the next few weeks while I put the final touches on this pen and ink shading course. Now, apart from the usual big thank you to everyone who supported my books, Pen and Ink Drawing: A Simple Guide, and the complimentary workbook, I'm making a special announcement, and that's for those of you who are not already aware via Instagram or YouTube stories, and that's so that you know that the ebook for Pen and Ink Drawing: A Simple Guide is now available. You can get it now on Amazon for your Kindle e-reader, or read it virtually on any platform or device that has the Kindle app. So whether you have an iPad, iPhone, an Android, a Windows, tablet, or phone, you can read it with no problem. So now you can have your book anywhere you go and get it from anywhere you go, no shipping. All right. So it will also soon be available on other platforms like Apple iBook Store. And, I'm really excited. I know many of you have been waiting for it. Now you can easily have yours in less than 5 minutes. And remember to follow me on Instagram, guys. I'm always posting new drawings, sharing quick tips that hopefully, brings you some inspiration and helps to keep you motivated. Hey, everyone. I'm Alfonso, and welcome to this workshop on the essentials of urban sketching. I'm really excited about this workshop and glad you guys decided to join in. You won't only be learning about the essentials necessarily, but I'll be sharing with you some invaluable tips that have helped me tremendously in my process and hopefully will help you too. Okay, so this workshop is divided into 4 parts. In part 1, we'll be looking at some of the basic materials. There's some basic supplies that I believe that you need, and I'll be going over some drawing fundamentals, as well as taking a look at some of the basic aspects of watercolor. And in part 2, we'll be looking at how to break down and simplify a scene, so at least you can kind of get an understanding of what you're looking at. And in part 3, here we'll actually discuss some design concepts like emphasis, contrast, and so on. And in final, we will actually close out with a demo drawing, which I'll walk you through my process step by step so you can have an idea of how I actually start from beginning to end. So let's get started. Now, when it comes to urban sketching, you have a wide variety of materials and supplies to choose from. Now, depending on your style, of course, your comfort, your budget, of course, and just your basic preference. And while I feel you should definitely explore as many as you can, I don't necessarily believe that you should burden yourself with a cumbersome baggage of stuff. Just try to keep it really simple, light, and practical. Urban sketching is a truly fun and really liberating experience. And I believe the simpler you keep your supplies, especially if you're moving around, because you want to keep that experience spontaneous and immediate. And that's a part of the fun and the joys of, going around and sketching. You want to be able to just grab your stuff and get going. So what I'll do is I'm going to share 10 basic types of supplies that I believe is invaluable for your arsenal. And this is assuming that you also want to do some watercolor eventually. But if you don't, that means this list will even be shorter for you. So here they are. Paper is important. This is the thing that's preserving your work. You wouldn't want to spend a lot of money and time and creative effort in creating something really beautiful that you cherish so much, and then it deteriorates in no time. So it's really important that you really get the best quality paper that you can afford. So what are some properties to look for? 1, ensure your paper is acid-free. Acid-free paper is more capable to withstand the deteriorating effects of light, so your art can really last a long time. For ink drawing, smooth bristle paper like the Strathmore 500 series is best. There's no bleeding. Nibs, your pen nibs will really glide effortlessly smooth, and tiny details are no issue. And plus, it can withstand layers of inking and the most abrasive erasing. Now, bristle paper can handle wet media, but watercolor is best applied to watercolor paper. All right. So generally, at least a 140-pound weight, like this Strathmore 500 series cold press sheet, would be excellent for that. Whether you sketch on a single sheet, a drawing pad, sketchbook, or journal, try to use the best quality paper you can afford. Pencils are an indispensable supply, right? You want a lead that is not too hard and not too soft, all right? Deep, soft leads like a 2B grade and higher often smudge easily and can be a bit troublesome to erase. And then on the other hand, hard points like a 2H and anything higher than that, maybe too light, and can sometimes dig into the paper or whatever drawing surface that you're using. All right, so I usually recommend like a H or a HB or a B grade pencil. Those are generally best. Watercolor pencils are also nice. The good thing is you won't have to worry about your marks showing should you later on apply watercolor, because they will just dissolve away with what media you apply. Now there are tons of pens to choose from. All right, technical drawing pens, fountain pens, dip pens, brush pens, ballpoint pens, rollerball pens. Try to get pens, however, with permanent ink. All right, especially water resistant ink, and have at least 2 point sizes, one fine, one medium or bold, and that's it. There's no need to really go overboard with getting all these expensive pens. Just try to get at least permanent ink, water resistant, and try to get at least 2 point sizes, a fine point and a bold point, and that's pretty much it. For erasing, you don't need more than a simple plastic or kneaded eraser. Once it's gentle on the drawing surface and erases without leaving those stainy smudges or smears, that's fine. A ruler is super useful for lines, angles, measurements, edges, but this doesn't mean you won't be drawing your lines by hand. Of course you will. But sometimes a ruler is useful to just place small dots that can serve as a guide for your sketching. If you're drawing trees, buildings, light poles, horizons, and so on. A simple 6-inch rule is all you need. Some kind of a fastener is useful for holding down those stubborn sheets sometimes. So you can use something like a rubber band, paper clips, or just a small piece of artist tape with a mild adhesive. So that's pretty much all you need. For urban sketching, you really don't need a large collection of colors. Actually, a basic palette is best, so you're not overwhelmed with choices, all right? And plus, it pushes you to practice and get better at your mixing. When selecting colors, try to get single pigment paints, all right? And even a nice travel set like this one by Dale Around is pretty useful. It has a nice range of colors. There are a variety of brushes to choose from, but try to have at least 2 sizes, one for fine details, one for bolder brushwork. Round, flat, natural, synthetic, that's down to your personal preference. But try to use brushes that hold water really well and can keep a sharp point. All right. So for on-the-go painting, a pocket-sized brush is also awesome. Water brushes for the inbuilt water reservoir are also useful, but be careful with them because they really take some getting used to. So the simpler, the better. So if you'll be painting on the go, a small, tight, and durable water bottle is always useful. I usually keep 2 of them. An absorbent like a piece of paper towel, an old sock, a washcloth is always useful for dabbing your brush to remove excess water. And plus, a little scrap of paper, for testing your marks and your color mixes is also really useful. And perhaps the only other thing you really need is a container to put all your supplies in, and maybe a folded chair to sit or something like that. But other than that, you really don't need that many supplies to get you started. Now, a commonly overlooked but really important aspect of drawing that can definitely affect your urban sketching, actually your drawing practice in general, has to do with how you control your drawing instrument. All right. Now, remember, you'll be drawing buildings, trees, roads, people, and all kinds of things, So making small adjustments in the way you move your arm or hold your instrument can affect the quality of your marks significantly. A general recommendation is to be aware of one, the movement that occurs along the entire arm, right? From your fingers to your shoulders, all right? And also to be aware of how tightly you grip the drawing instrument. And three, how hard you press down. So those three factors are very important. The movement from your fingers to your shoulder, how tightly you grip the drawing instrument you're using, whether it's a pen or pencil, and how hard you press down on the drawing surface. Those three things are really important. Generally, in making long strokes, like when you're drawing buildings, roads, the horizon or perspective lines, you're trying to move your entire arm as one unit. So you essentially kind of lock your elbows and let most of the movement revolve around your shoulders. So you're moving your entire arm as one. And what this does is enables you to make really long continuous strokes in a very smooth and natural way. Also, relax your grip a bit and kind of rehearse the movement before making a mark, so it will be really smooth and steady. Another basic aspect of drawing that is especially important to urban sketching is drawing lines, and especially vertical and horizontal lines. Now, these two lines are important to holding together the structure of an image, because you're drawing buildings and trees and roads and perspective lines and so on. So if these lines are not sound, if they're not well drawn, your drawing can become unstable and things can appear imbalanced or like it's toppling over. So when drawing vertical and horizontal lines, you don't necessarily have to use a ruler or a straight edge. In fact, I generally recommend that you practice drawing them freehand. But a simple technique that you can use is to just draw small dots, like at the beginning of a line, at the end of the line, and at the midpoint. And then all you're doing is pretty much rehearsing your movement and then connecting the dots. This just helps to give you a bit more control, and also don't try to make it perfectly straight either. If your lines wobble a bit, that's fine. Wobbly lines actually generally have a bit more character and convey a sense of life and movement, much more than just perfectly straight lines. They don't look as mechanical or geometric. They look more full of life, more spontaneous, and more expressive. Now, a common issue in drawing with ink is whether to draw with ink only or with a pencil on the drawing. Now, there are pros and cons to both, and I guess it depends on your style, the subject, or the circumstance. So let's take a look at both. Now, generally, I recommend doing at least a simple pencil sketch before you do an ink drawing. It doesn't have to be fully rendered, but just enough to kind of lay out the composition of the drawing before actually applying your ink work. The thing that I really like about having a pencil on the drawing is being able to try things and kind of experiment with your composition. All right. So what if you use this or that frame? What if I include this or that detail? What if I focus here instead of there? What if I make this tall or make that shorter? A pencil on the drawing or sketch affords you, to measure multiple times before you make the cut, so to speak. And why not allow yourself the opportunity to do that? You generally end up being more pleased with the composition anyway. And as I have said, the under drawing doesn't have to be and shouldn't really be a finished drawing. Just a basic sketch, that serves the purpose of giving you a guide to follow for your ink work or whatever, watercolor or whatever you choose to use afterwards. Now, don't forget that with pencil, you're not just limited to doing an under drawing. There are other types of information that you can add as well, because you can easily erase it afterwards. So in addition to just doing an underdrawing, I sometimes jot down a few notes, reminders. I may even put a quick diagram. I may even put a value scale, things like that, that serve as a reference that I know I can easily, erase later on. And lastly, sketching things out with a pencil also forces you to take the time to make observations and think about your drawing before just jumping in. And this is very important because it allows you to explore ideas and questions and really interact with the scene before committing to it. And this is something that sometimes we can get carried away and forget to do. Now, just jumping into an ink drawing with no pencil sketcher on the drawing can be a bit intimidating, and of course, rightfully so. You can't erase, and each mark you make is permanent. But there's a sweet paradox here, and it's that you're now free from that worry. All right. So there is something just so liberating and empowering in just freely creating a drawing in ink and not having to worry about erasing lines or correcting mistakes. Now, of course, it may not necessarily be as easy as it sounds, So I'm going to share some tips with you that I believe are pretty useful when it comes to just drawing straight in ink with no prior pencil sketcher on the drawing. That will hopefully ease your mind a bit. Now, since you won't be able to erase your lines, I advise you take some time to really look at your scene before you start drawing. So that way, when you actually start drawing, your lines will be more confident and your drawing will be more purposeful. And you really have a sense of what you're doing. So, what are some of the things to look for? Well, first, you look for landmarks. Things in a scene that you think are structurally important for your drawing. Things that you believe will help you to construct a drawing more easily. Of course, these will vary from scene to scene, but there's some basic things to keep in mind, like large and dominant shapes, strong vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines, like the lines of perspective, the edges of buildings. These are some of the basic things to look for that will help you to kind of like navigate your way through the drawing, even though you're using ink. Another tip is to try to gauge certain measurements before you actually start drawing, just to get a sense of proportion. So make some comparative measurements. How tall is that building compared to this one? How wide is the house compared to how tall it is? Is that window about half the size of the door, or is the door about a third the height of the house, and so on? These are the types of comparison and measurements to get a sense of before you actually start drawing, because then you have this subconscious sense of proportions that will be guiding your drawing. Now, when drawing with ink, if you're not careful, you can find out that a line is not straight when you're actually at the end of the line. I've made that mistake many times. And to avoid this, I use a system of dots. So I'll measure or guesstimate a distance or position, make a mark, and then draw my line or shape or whatever it is. It's a very simple technique, and it will save you from making lots of mistakes, leaves no mess, and allows you to draw with ink with confidence. So you're essentially guesstimating the distance of a position. You make a dot, and then you simply connect them. So let's talk about watercolor. It is such a beautiful and amazing medium, and although there is so much we could talk about, let's just go over some of the essentials. Now, just in case you want to apply your watercolor to your urban sketches, you realize that there really isn't much you need to get started. Now, before we even talk about paints, let's talk about paper. Paper is very important. The type of paper you use can significantly affect the quality of your work. And as I discussed before, it is important to use paper with the right weight, at least like 140 pound, like this 140 pound cold press sheet here that I have from the Strathmore 500 series. Paper that is too low in weight may buckle when you apply wet media to it. So try your best to work with adequate weight watercolor paper. Or at least try multimedia paper if you're not able to get your hands on some good quality watercolor paper. It is best to use a compact selection of colors that at least includes a warm and cool version of your reds, yellows, and blues, because this will enable you to have the essential primary colors that will enable you to mix a wide range of colors in hues, values, and saturations. A couple a convenient green or two is useful. Earth colors, of course, because they allow you to create subdued and muted mixes, and grays, and of course are obviously super convenient for landscape painting in general. Now I'm going to share a few useful tips to keep in mind, especially for beginners. Now, though you may see many artists seem to just spontaneously and effortlessly just apply their watercolors, they're able to do this through years of practice. It helps to really plan your approach a bit, especially if you're just learning. Eventually, certain steps will become second nature to you, or not even necessary after a while. But it helps when starting out to take certain preparatory steps before you just jump into applying your paint to paper. So the first one is to always keep a small piece of scrap paper, which you can use to test your colors or your mixes to ensure you're pleased with it before you actually apply them to your art. Sometimes it will take you a few tries before you really get the right color or the right saturation or the right value or just the right amount of water in your brush. Another thing is to take the time to really look at the scene and try to identify and simplify the colors and the saturations and the values that you see, because it is never necessary to try to recreate every color that you see in front of you. Oftentimes you'll find that one or two colors in your palette can be used in several different ways and could mix to substitute for several of the colors that you actually see in a scene. All right, so try to not be overwhelmed by all the variations of colors that you may see in a scene, and understand that you can actually simplify it to just a few groups of color categories or color families. And the last tip is to make a general plan of how you will use the colors that you have to match or account for the colors that you see. So think about the colors, the values, the saturations you see, and then take a look at your palette and see how you can create that match. So think of what mixes you may have to use. Think of what combinations or what layers you may have to apply from your palette. Think of the ways that you may have to use these two colors to account for that one. Sometimes you'll have to simplify or even remove a color that you see, or just completely ignore it and account for the ones that you have to recreate that scene. And this also fosters a sense of spontaneity and enable you to feel free to use your mixes and your color combinations and recreate your version of what you're observing. Okay, everyone, so if you like my videos, remember to give this video a thumbs up, and also subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you won't miss any new uploads. And as usual, thanks so much for watching, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.